American businessman Mark Carney, the one who hopes to be the unelected Prime Minister of Canada, is coming under a lot of scrutiny, and much of what he's trying to hide from investigation seems to be a great amount of conflict of interest, as well as being supported by many companies and countries that are in direct competition with Canadian industry and Canada itself. And another stark claim that he has deforested many sections of this world. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. European Union businessman and WEF board member Mark Carney, who hopes to one day be the unelected Prime Minister of Canada, is under a lot of scrutiny because his money, we don't know where he's making it, and he doesn't seem to be practicing what he expects all of the Canadians to be practicing. He seems to be saying one thing to us and doing another thing. Much of what he's saying has been now discovered to be incorrect or deceptive in its very nature and its very statement. And I'm assuming, by the way, that Mark Carney avoids the independent media like the plague, that has got a lot to do with him hoping that the mainstream media, the corporation media, the media that he hopes to one day use Canadian tax dollars to put in his back pocket, so that they will say only what he tells them to say, or he will threaten them by cutting off the tax dollars. I think that the idea is that he was hoping nobody would ever figure it out, because he has nothing but contempt for any person that he doesn't think to have an intellect. And we all know that the far left, especially the Liberal Party, has zero respect for the Canadian voter, for the Canadian population. Zero respect. You can tell by the way they have not listened to a single thing we've said to them in the last 10 years. Now the platform known as X has come to life with a lot of information, a lot of it showing that Mark Carney is being intentionally deceptive. And I'm going to show you or showcase to you a couple of really good ones in this episode. Well, let's open up with one from reporter Andy Lee, who says that Mark Carney's top donors are Oliver Damaris, who's chair of the Canada-Chinese Business Council. And the number 2 donor is Scott Bryson, the vice chair of the Canada-China Business Council. And I think that what I just said says a lot, says enough. I mean, when you hear Mark Carney talk from the microphone and he says that he's never going to do business with Trump and that he thinks that we should try to find other markets that he previously closed down, what other country do you think that he's talking about? He clearly has a stronger relationship with the Chinese than he does with America, despite having most of his businesses located in America. I think that what he's hoping to do is have you, like a magician, show you one thing and have you looking in the other direction while he actually pulls off getting business from China to make him filthy rich and to make the rest of us live in a less than perfect society, or to take down our freedoms and our rights and our freedom of speech and many of the things that seem to bother the Liberal Party. Well, I mean, can you really call them liberals with the amount of restrictions that they want to put onto our lives? They are the opposite of what a liberal is. They are a Marxist. And they think that you and I don't deserve to have, a backyard. We don't deserve to have a car that which we can get around in, while they themselves are living off the sweat of your hard work. While they are taking tax dollar pays, while they are using taxes to pay for their daily living, the food that they eat, the cars that they drive, the planes that they jet set around in. I mean, Mark Carney is traveling, despite not being the Prime Minister and despite not even being a member of Parliament. He's traveling around with our CMP in a caravan of SUVs, then not one of them are electric. But why does that man have that kind of protection? He's not even an elected member of Parliament. I think what we're looking at is the kind of corruption that comes along with people who dream of implementing the communist system so that they themselves can do whatever they want, and you will have to be held to the scrutiny, or you will be held in place by threats of physical violence by the military arm of the government. You'll be told lies by the propaganda arm, and then you'll be controlled by the military arm, and all the while Canada will rapidly turn into some banana republic where the top 25 people in the country get rich, 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 and the rest of us live in tin shacks with cardboard roofs. Don't worry, Mark Carney will tell you, I saved the economy of 2 countries with the power of my calculator. Now, I'm not sure that it's true in either case. When you follow the story, when you look at it and you unravel it, you realize that the economy of Canada was much easily saved because of our banking policies, because we didn't allow for many of the gross amounts of debt that were shared. And that was one of the reasons why the 2008 didn't bother us so much. And Mark Carney claiming that he was the magic man behind the curtain is simply not accurate, and it's been proven, or it's been debunked by this point. Then he further says that he helped save England, and yet when you look at England right now, they have some of the worst economy in Europe, in the Western world. I mean, there are places, there are individual states in America that have a greater GDP than England. So I'm not sure that that's been, I'm pretty certain that that's been disproved. I'm pretty sure that that's not accurate either, according to many people that I've spoken to, listened to, and heard from. Pierre Poilievre had something to say about Mark Carney's claim that he helped Paul Martin balance the budget. So this is from his ex. Carney said he helped Paul Martin balance the budget. The budget was balanced in 1998 when Carney was outside of our country and not even working for the Canadian government. Carney did not join government until 2004, 6 years after the budget was balanced. How does that work? Now, let me say before I finish this tweet. So 2004 has been a member of the Liberal Party. How's that an outsider? That's 20 years. This guy, I don't know. Paul Carney's budget bluff. Paul Martin becomes finance minister while Mark Carney is living in London, England. In 1998, Paul Martin balances the budget. Mark Carney moves from London to New York because he loves to be in America. He loves the United States. All the businesses are there. 2004, Mark Carney first joins the finance department as a bureaucrat. Now, I could show you some of the comments, but I don't want to. There's a lot of profanity. There's a lot of people on the far left who worship the ground. Well, I don't know if it's so much that they worship the ground that Carney walks on, or if they just really are so envious and so upset with Pierre Poilievre. There's a lot of far left bots on the platform of X. They are very. Remember that the far left thinks that they can brainwash you into thinking the way that they do. They want you to believe. They believe that you cannot think and reason for yourself. And when you come up against a lot of them arguments on X, they typically revert to just a whole bunch of name calling and profanity. There's never anything to support their case. There's never any dissection or any quality of point. There's nothing beyond a lot of profanity and a lot of supposition, a lot of unfounded statements. That in many cases, you look at it and you think, you wish that were true, but it's not true, and that's why you can't defend it. I think what matters is that Mark Carney is trying to attach himself to that, like he was the PBO, or he was like, the deputy finance minister, or he was one of these high-level bureaucrats that would have the ability to put the red ink and to make the cuts and to offer the suggestions, rather than just be a person who's looking after numbers and trying to, keep track of wherever the expenditures are. I mean, this is 20 years ago. And if he had been a high-ranking member of the bureaucracy, he would have probably stated that. He would have said, in those days, I was the deputy finance, or the deputy to the assistant to the deputy, whatever it is. The point I'm making is that the most he could have hoped to have gotten was a stack of paper on his, because there wouldn't have been a lot of email in those days. A stack of paper on his desk, and then he would have gone through that, and he would have handed that into his, to the other person at the other desk at the other end of the building, along with everybody else. And then those people would have reproofed the numbers, or they would have done it on Lotus or some sort of program of the day. The idea that he has to try to say all of these things is something that the far left likes to do. Like, they like to say, "Oh, where do you get your education from?" And then I like to fall back on one of my favorite movies, Good Will Hunting. You dropped $150,000 on an education you could have got for $1.50 in late charges at any public library. The point of that statement is that the information is readily available. So I don't know why, in your mind, or the people's minds that try to use that as a support to their argument, that because the individual went to school, somehow that makes them smarter or better at it or more adept at it. Either way, I think that Mark Carney trying to attach himself to any history of the Canadian government, all the while telling you that he's an outsider, is a flag. It's a contradiction. And it seems very desperate. So I think in his mind that he believes that he'll be able, what he wants is to be able to get the support of the people to initiate these emergency things, just like in China or in Ukraine or in any number of dictatorships that we could talk about. Now, new allegations have come forward that Carney's businesses have deforested 9,000 hectares in Brazil in the rainforest. 9,000 hectares. They're not telling you that when he's doing his little rounds of the climate change. This was a post put up by Roman Barber. Brookfield deforested 9,000 hectares of the Cerrado region in Brazil. The report estimates that 600,000 tons of CO2 was emitted by deforesting this area, equivalent to 1.2 million flights from London to New York. Carney is a lying hypocrite. A lot that I have to say about this, and I won't necessarily dive right into it right now, but I just think that we are again looking at an elitist, an insider, a billionaire businessman who thinks that he is not accountable for the things that he is trying to hold you to account. I think that we have to start to understand that this guy is not practicing what he preaches. And after 10 years of the Liberal Party showing everybody that they don't have to practice what they preach, I can't handle it anymore. We need to be a country that can be proud of our leadership. And who can be proud of a person who says one thing and do another? If it was your brother, if it was your boyfriend, if it was your husband, if it was anybody, you would tell yourself that that would be embarrassing. Well, this is embarrassing. And he's only going to turn around and embarrass us on the world stage. Do you really believe that he's going to allow you to cut down a tree in the backyard? No, because he won't even let you put a tree on your balcony. He's only going to allow you to live in gigantic high rises. There's no backyard. Maybe that's why. Maybe he wants the whole rest of the country so he can deforest it. Maybe he just wants to cut down all the lumber that's in there and turn it into some sort of business. Again, for him, not for you, right? Because all of the company that did this, they're in the United States or they're in Brazil. They're not in Canada. Why would they be in Canada? Then they would have to pay the Canadian tax rates. Then they would have to pay the carbon tax. Meanwhile, they can run around all these countries, do whatever they want, and nobody is really looking, no oversight. 9,000 hectares is a lot of property. And he is telling you from the privacy and the comfort of his private jet that you should be greener, that you're not doing enough, that you have to pay him and pay. Now, I suppose it's possible, like is mentioned here by unofficial First Lady of Common Sense, did he buy carbon credits? I mean, I guess that's a possibility that he gave somebody some money. But let's be straightforward. What good are carbon credits anyway? Really what he should be doing is planting trees back in the spot because they do grow back and it is a renewable resource. However, the argument isn't whether or not it's a renewable resource or whether or not he paid for carbon credits. The argument is that if he was truly an environmental zealot, if he was truly trying to practice what he preaches, if he was truly expecting to lead by example, he wouldn't have cut down a single tree. He would have put up a big sign around it that said that all those trees belong to Brookfield and they're going to stay here forever. Instead, he chopped them up, cut them down, burned all the diesel that he could care to for the chainsaws, for the mills, for the trucks that transported it, all of the men that were traipsing through the woods, stomping on all the little ecosystems, all the insects and all the other live bugs and animals that would have been in that part of the tree, all gone. All the birds, forget about it. They're all gone. They're gone because Mark Carney decided that he was going to cut it down so he could make a buck. Now he wants you to believe that somehow he's Mr. Green, that he's Mr. Environmental. I believe that he's telling you that so that you believe it, but let's just look at what he's doing when nobody's looking. I think that's the mark of a man, right? That's the mark of a leader. What can you find out that's not true when nobody's looking? And if you find out that the worst thing they've done has been a politician their whole life versus all of the lies and all the hypocrisy of flying private jets, being board member of various companies that have cut down many environmental things, running pipelines in Brazil and Saudi Arabia, the list goes on and on. I mean, we're not even comparing apples to oranges here. This is so far apart. You're talking about the all the hallmarks of a self-entitled, narcissistic hypocrite. And I think that as a Canadian country, we have had enough of those. That's my opinion. You can leave me your opinion down in the comments. People wonder why I haven't commented on the 51st state very much. And I'll tell you the reality of it. The truth of it is that because people are not looking at the question correctly, Now that these corporate media have caught up, I will begin to weigh in on it. The corporate media has just come to the realization and the rationalization that technically King Charles is the head of the country. And if Canada wanted to become the 51st state, even if every person in Canada chose to become a member of the United States, technically that would be a rebellion. That would be the American Revolution all over again, but it would be the Canadian Revolution. And they've just caught up to that, and they've sent a question to King Charles asking what his opinion is and why he hasn't weighed in on the matter. Now, I'm picking this up from Grok, who, as in the AI, simply scans all of the stories and creates an amalgamation, a summary, as they call it. King's silence sparks debate on Canadian sovereignty. It's trending on the platform of X. Buckingham Palace has declined to comment on statements made by U.S. President Donald Trump suggesting annexation of Canada, citing the need for advice from the Canadian government before any official response. This has sparked a significant debate among Canadians about the relevance of the role of the monarchy in Canada, with many expressing disappointment over King Charles III's silence on the issue of Canadian sovereignty. I don't need King Charles to tell me that I'm a sovereign citizen. I have been saying from the beginning that if anybody wanted to join the Americans, we would have to separate from the empire. I mean, any person who looks at their money with any split second would see the King Charles or the Queen's face on their money, depending on which note has been made. Eventually, he's going to have his face put on everything, the stamp, all of it. However, in the hysteria, in the madness, and the chaos of just trying to blame yourselves, in the desire of lighting your hair on fire so that you don't have to check the reality of your rent prices and the inflation in the grocery store and the food prices, in trying to bring the country away from the reality of their life and expose them to this theater that is Donald Trump, so hopefully the Liberal Party will get a kick in the polls. We have now come to the reality. The reality is that to do so would mean that Canada would have to separate from the British Crown. And King Charles doesn't seem to be too worried about what's happening with Canadians, whether it be the separation of Canada from the British Crown, whether it be the high inflation, the high taxes, the carbon tax, the inappropriate behavior of an unelected member trying to become Prime Minister of Canada, the Governor General not forcing the Canadian Parliament to dissolve instead allowing the government to prorogue. I mean, you spent your whole first section of the government this year in a filibuster over the government's refusal to surrender the Green Slush Fund document. And you allowed them to prorogue instead of saying, no, this is clearly a dysfunctional government and the country deserves better. Now we have everybody running around focused more on Donald Trump than they are on the leadership of Canada. That's how far off the mark we are. And now, a month or whatever it is later, and now after all the insults at Pierre Poilievre, just now the corporate media has caught up to the reality. They've decided to send the question to King Charles, who has decided to say nothing, though I'm sure King Charles didn't get to say anything. That was a statement released. I can say with certainty that Canada would save a lot of money were we to separate from King Charles, and we would have a lot of things that we could do on our own. What I'm speaking to is me and you down here on the ground, with the high rise cost of groceries, with the enormous cost of fuel, with all of the threats of emergency powers. I tell you straight, Mark Carney having dictatorial powers in Canada scares me a lot more than anything Donald Trump has said or anything Donald Trump has done. Giving the Marxist totalitarian power in this country, well, that'll just turn this country into every other Marxist country you've ever seen, where people are silenced and starved and treated like they don't really matter. That worries me more than anything that the Donald Trump office or government has ever said or done. And it should bring home to you the reality of the situation. You say, let's join America because you are tired of being poor and you're tired of the terrible policies of the far left. And I say, well, it's less about joining America and it's more about revolting against the British Crown, which is a whole different question, isn't it? I mean, it changes it, doesn't it? One is separation, one is joining. So when you hear people talking foolish, it's designed to keep you distracted from the reality. The reality is that rent are higher than anywhere on earth. Cell phones, higher than anywhere on earth. Carbon tax, higher than anywhere on earth. The amount of expenditures that they are hoping that this Canadian population will take care of for them, it just grows and grows and grows. Donald Trump, he's not too worried about whether or not you and I are going to join the Americas. I mean, if you really wanted to shut down Donald Trump, all you'd have to say is, fine, we'll join the United States of America. We want 700 electoral college votes. And that would like bring the whole conversation to a screeching halt. And for those of you that don't understand what I just mean, that would mean essentially that Canada could pick the president of the country. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.